BBC One with David Dimbleby.
Welcome to Question Time, which this week comes from Watford. And with us tonight, the Conservative Communities Secretary, Sajid Javid, the Labour MP who resigned from the Shadow Cabinet to run Owen Smith's unsuccessful leadership bid, Lisa Nandy, the Editor-in-Chief of The Economist, Zanny Minton Beddoes, the talk show host, formerly of Republicans Abroad, Charlie Wolfe, and the radio presenter, former US Marine and frontman of the fun-loving Criminals, Huey Morgan. Thanks very much. And as ever, you can join the debate on Facebook, on Twitter, or you can text us 83981 when the going gets hot. Let's have our first question from John Grossman, please. Mr. Grossman.
Does today's High Court judgment fly in the face of democracy by giving Parliament the opportunity of overturning the referendum result?
And the High Court, which said that the referendum was only advisory and therefore Parliament had to turn it into reality. Sajid Javid.
Yes, it does. Look, clearly today's result was disappointing. It's not the end of the legal process. The government has appealed and there'll be a further decision, and that's the one that will ultimately matter. But this isn't just a legal issue. I think there's a really important moral issue here as well. If we just cast our minds back a bit, we had a general election where the party that won promised a referendum, a simple in-out referendum. We then had the legislation in Parliament, which was backed 6-1 by MPs of all parties, backed 6-1, saying we should go ahead and have this referendum. Then, of course, we had it, and the result was very, very clear. Now, I don't think it matters anymore what side of the debate one was on. We had a robust debate. We had the largest turnout of any electoral exercise ever that's taken place in this country. It was a clear result. Clear instructions were issued to the British people. And this...
To the British people? I mean by the British people?
So issued by the British people.
Some tried to issue it to the British people, but it didn't work.
Issued by the people to their politicians, the people that govern them, saying, we've made a decision, thanks for the debate, we've now made a decision, now it's our job as politicians to get on with it.
But why didn't you spot
this to frustrate that?
Why didn't you spot this flaw, which was perfectly clear that you yourselves had said referendums are only advisory unless we say they're compulsory. And you didn't make this a clear point in this thing. That's what it said, that the High Court says.
Well,
why didn't you spot it? I don't understand. Sorry, one other thing. 5 years ago, under the UK's constitutional arrangements, Parliament must be responsible for deciding whether or not to take action in response to a referendum result. Parliament responsible. You could have got round it if you'd thought things through.
Because at the time, it was clear at the time. First of all, if you remember when the referendum was held, and the documents that were sent to every household in the referendum as well, it was absolutely clear that it would be a binding result. Every single parliamentarian understood that. And as I said, 6-1, they voted to have the Referendum Act, which allowed it in the first place. And the legal argument, I think, obviously we've had a result today with a lower court has a particular view. Let's see what the Supreme Court says. But it's the government's view that this is an international treaty. The executive has a right to change that. But the executive also, I think, has the moral authority because it has been given its instructions by the British people.
You may not have the legal authority. It's constitutional matter.
This is an attempt to frustrate the will of the British people, and it is unacceptable. That's what it is.
So you're saying the judges are trying to frustrate democracy?
No, the people have brought the court case.
Wait a minute, the judges made the judgment. The people who brought the court case didn't make the judgment.
Look, the judges, we live in a country where our independent system, our legal system is rightly independent, and ultimately what the courts decide is exactly what will happen. But this is an attempt by people to find any mechanism possible to try and frustrate what the British people have decided.
All right. Lisa Nandy.
Well, I agree with something that Sajid said, which is that Parliament voted to delegate this decision to the public, and that the public have made that decision. And I was somebody who campaigned on the Remain side, but I lost, we lost, and the UK is now leaving the European Union. And this judgment today has caused a great deal of concern. I think it's quite significant for a number of reasons, but it's not significant in that it will stop us from leaving the European Union. Britain is leaving the European Union, and whether or not Parliament has to vote to trigger Article 50, this will happen. Because in reality, there are no more than a handful of parliamentarians who would seek to block that decision. I voted for Remain, and I'll be voting to trigger Article 50. Hilary Benn, Jeremy Corbyn, a whole range of leading figures who will be voting in favour of this. But I don't think it's unreasonable to ask Theresa May to come to Parliament and explain to Parliament and the people what her broad approach to these Brexit negotiations is going to be.
To explain and have a vote on it, or just to come and explain? To
come and explain to us before we as a country decide to go down that path of triggering Article 50, because we're 4 months in.
Do you want a vote or not?
Well,
Parliament?
I don't think it matters whether we have a vote or not, because quite frankly, we're going to vote to trigger Article 50 and we're going to leave the European Union. But what does really matter is that we understand from this government whether they're going to prioritise single market access or restrictions on freedom of movement, whether they're going to seek to remain in the European arrest warrant, whether they're going to seek to protect our environment and our workers under European law. And so far, we're 4 months in and we don't know that. The only person that's holding this decision up is Theresa May. She could accept this judgment, she could come before the House, she could tell us and the country what her plan is, and then she would get a vote to trigger Article 50.
Let's hear from one or two members of the audience, and I'll come back to more members of the panel. The woman there in the third row.
My understanding is today that the decision in the High Court today was based on an Act of Parliament dating to the 1600s. And it's unbelievable that the people have voted, the referendum was held, and now we can't proceed because of an Act of Parliament dating back from the 1600s in the time of King James.
Okay.
What on earth is going on?
Huey Morgan.
I agree with the lady wholeheartedly. I do think to a certain extent a lot of this is left to a country that's divided. Half the country dislikes the other half of the country with how they decided to vote. And we're left in a certain situation where the process would probably not be initiated if the result was to remain. And it seems like important decisions are far too important to be left to the people of the country in this instance.
Right. Zanny.
Can I be a voice that begs to differ on some of this? I don't think today's decision, it's hard for me to see that this is a undermining of democracy in this country. This country believes in parliamentary sovereignty, and this country has an unwritten constitution. And at one level, the courts today, the High Court, has had a very careful legal argument. It has upheld, in its view, the rule of law. And I think we believe in having a country where the rule of law is upheld. Secondly, I find it hard to say that when our own courts are saying our own parliament should have another voice in this decision, that it is somehow undermining the principle of taking back control, which was driving a lot of the arguments for leaving the European Union. It doesn't mean, as Lisa said, that we won't go forward. I suspect that when there is a vote in Parliament, then it will be clearly approved that Article 50 will be triggered. But parliamentary sovereignty is an absolute underpinning of this country's unwritten institution.
But it certainly has slowed the government process down, hasn't it?
Yeah, but David...
I mean, it's like it's a stumbling block in the way of the Prime Minister's policy.
It may slow the process down. I think that slowing the process down to do it properly, in a view that upholds the rule of law and our Constitution, would be a good thing. Except that
Slowing the process down in this particular way might allow all sorts of people to come and meddle with what she plans. Would it not? Well, or do you think she'll get a clear run in the House?
No, I think to both Danny's point and Lisa's point earlier, that if it meant that you had to... If the government eventually loses this case, and it means you have to go to Parliament and get an Act of Parliament and go through all that, what people like Lisa and others, and Owen Smith said this, and she read his campaign, what they want is the government to lay out its negotiating cards, put the cards on the table before you get into the negotiating room. No one does that. It could mean a worse deal for the British people. That's what I mean. It's an attempt to frustrate it. It's an attempt to get a worse deal. That's not acceptable.
We want to know what you are aiming to do, because this will have a profound effect on people's jobs and people's lives, not just for this Parliament, but for decades and decades to come. And it seems to me not unreasonable that the government sets out its plan to us
You led Owen Smith's campaign and he called for a second referendum.
When you're going to have to set them out to Brussels on day one after we trigger Article 15.
Did you call for a second referendum? Did you support a second referendum?
I've never called for a second referendum.
Well, you led Owen's campaign. That was a centrepiece of his
I don't believe that we should have a second referendum.
So why did you support his campaign?
I don't think we need a parliamentary vote, but we do need a strategy.
Why did you support his campaign?
Well,
he stood on Question Time and said we've got to have a second referendum.
Well, simply because I thought he was the best person to lead the Labour
but wrong
Party.
on this issue. The woman up there with fair hair in the second row from the top. Yeah.
We can talk about the ins and outs and the legalities of this for a very long time, but the fact is it's a total embarrassment. We're a laughing stock in Europe and beyond. The whole thing has been mucked up from the very beginning. A lot of public money is going to be diverted into fighting this. Money that should be used for public services. And Sajid Javid, I don't know why you're not more embarrassed than you are to represent your party today. It's an embarrassment.
OK, hold on a second. Charlie Wolf.
You know, as someone from Boston, where the original Tea Party was, I can only imagine if we had at the time, you know, as we were dressed up as Indians and going on that ship to dump the tea, someone said, wait, stop, let's make a vote. Someone want cream with that, sugars, you dump the tea. Get the hell out of the European Union. That's what we said. You know, that's end of the story. If I may, I know that the system here is the Queen in Parliament. But if I may refer back to my system, which I think is more the natural system of political science. In the United States, it's we the people. And however it's stated, ultimately, I think it is we the people. So Parliament, first off, I'm amazed that Parliament had to give the people permission, because the Parliament works for the people. Everybody works for the people.
So you're amazed that Parliament... You're amazed that Parliament had to do
when Parliament had a vote to give them a referendum, because...
Well, of course they had to have a vote to give them a referendum.
Yeah, but I understand that, but what I'm saying in a theoretical standpoint, it's still... The Parliament works for the people, not the other way around.
Yeah. Well, that's also a disconnect happening worldwide, really.
What bothers me, though, is the whole European exercise was giving away power that wasn't theirs to give away. So the people have spoken. We've gone to the source. So I don't know what has to be questioned in the courts when it's gone right to the source, to you folks, and you were the ones that said, we want out. Okay. End of story.
You said that, yes.
Mr. Javid mentioned six against one politicians voted in favour of the acts of referendum. If they'd have known what the result was, would it have been the same? I suspect not.
OK, and you, sir, along the row there, in blue. Yes.
Yeah, Sajid Javid also said we had a really robust debate about this, but part of the problem, I think, for the country was the very poor quality of that debate. And it strikes me that in a parliamentary democracy, which is what this country is supposed to be, it is entirely appropriate for this to go back to Parliament to discuss it properly. And sometimes I think we get confused between what democracy is, or parliamentary democracy, and populism. And populism is a dangerous slide. And I agree fully with what Huey just said. Some decisions are too important, and a lack of strategic leadership has led us to that position.
And you said blue here on the front. Yeah.
I think you're missing a major constitutional issue. You're now facing, with an Act of Parliament, according to David Davis, if that's what's needed, you're going to have an unelected House of Lords blocking the will of the people. They have said, many in the House of Lords said they will block it. They're unelected. Where does democracy stand there?
So do you think, as some say, there might be a general election as a result of this, where the Prime Minister says, look, you know, I know what I want to do, and I'll have an election to see whether the voters
I believe if she
support
has a single Act of Parliament on Article 50 and it's blocked, her most attractive move forward is to call an instant general election.
Right. And you here?
I think we all know the reason why the government and the cabinet don't want this to go into the Houses of Parliament is because they haven't got a clue what they are doing. Exactly. And the problem is the devil's in the detail here. OK, we had the referendum result. But the devil's in the details. Anyone knows, once you start digging below and suddenly think, oh, what are we going to do about Ireland and this thing that was agreed in the 20s for free movement, but they're staying in the EU? And what are we going to do about the employment legislation? Are we going to say we can all work whatever hours we want to every week? And what are we going to do about this and that? And the devil's in the detail, and they have not got a clue what they're doing. The Three Musketeers are like this. They just don't know.
So that's your problem laid out, Sajid Javid. Do you agree with her?
Actually, I understand what she's saying, absolutely, and I think that it's perfectly reasonable for people to ask these kinds of questions, but the point is this, is that it's not the same thing as saying the government doesn't have a plan. Of course the government has a plan. Yeah. Right? Absolutely. Once the decision has been made, of course there's a plan. Well, but you would not expect a government to give you a running commentary on one of the most important negotiations that we face in a generation.
But nobody's getting any information at all. That's what they're complaining about.
You also remember, we've got to negotiate with 27 other countries. You would not lay all your cards on the table and say, this is what we want. No one enters negotiations in that way.
All right, the woman there shaking her head. You.
Sorry, this is our lives you're talking about. This is about the impact on our services. I work for the NHS at Great Ormond Street Hospital. If funding is cut, there is going to be a huge decrease in research. If you have a child who requires specialist services, that knowledge may not be there because that collaboration has been cut. 44 of research projects are going on collaboratively at Great Ormond Street Hospital. It gets millions of pounds for research. You have to have the people to come together to get the knowledge.
You're saying from the EU? From the EU, you're talking about.
The EU, 25% of all staff who are clinicians and 24% of all research staff come from non-British EU countries.
So you would want the government at this stage to reassure Great Ormond Street that whatever happens, you'll go on getting your research. Is that what you're saying?
I think we should not have I am very much a Remainer. I want us to stay in the EU. I want there to be freedom of movement. I want people to be able to come together, be collaborative, to do research, do tests. All of this stuff will be very much impaired if we leave the EU.
But the vote,
if you have one thing, I want the people who are leaving, who want to leave, I want them to one day unfortunately have a child who needs that treatment, but it's not there because the collaboration has not been there.
All right.
I'm sorry, but the research needs to continue.
What happened today was that it proves that democracy doesn't exist. We've lost it, and I'm afraid now is the time to say that we've given up. It's only in name only.
No, with the greatest respect, I don't think that is the case. I think that what today proves is that we have... it's not at all Parliament when it votes on...
We voted out, and they still don't accept it.
No, that's not what the High Court said. That is not what the High Court said. What the High Court ruling was is that there had to be a vote in Parliament because we are a parliamentary democracy. I don't think Parliament should overturn the will of the people. What I think there is a difference between direct democracy and referendums and parliamentary democracy. And we are a parliament. There are representative democracies, which is what we have, where you elect an MP, the MPs then form a government. That is parliamentary democracy.
Zanny,
can I make one point, David? Which is in this discussion, and I completely agree with the lady who made the point earlier. The British people in this referendum voted to leave the EU. That should be respected. They did not vote for any particular destination, and there was a lot of discussion prior to the referendum where people were promised totally contradictory things that couldn't happen. What we need to have in this country is a serious debate about where we want to get to. That is not the same as giving every detail of the negotiating strategy away. It is having a discussion of what do we want our relationship with Europe to be.
And that is
seems very sensible.
But that is also not the same as saying there should be a vote specifically on Article 50 in Parliament. Since this vote, I can't think of a single day in Parliament where there hasn't been some kind of debate or discussion related to Brexit, and obviously that will continue for weeks and months and possibly years. There's a new select committee being set up, which you've said Hilary Benn is running this committee, so there's lots of scrutiny. This is about frustrating the will of the people. That's all that it's about.
This country,
Sajid Javid, just let me ask you one question. Are you fearful that if there was a simple vote in Parliament next week on the issue of whether Article 50 should be invoked, that Parliament would have voted against it?
No,
after
actually,
17.5 million people have voted in favour?
That's what I'm not fearful about.
Well, what are you worried about?
What I would be concerned about is that process would lead to a much worse deal potentially for the British people.
Well, I want to know
Britain would be the loser of that process.
What you think, sir. Are you worried that Parliament will vote?
We've already decided on the rest of the world, and certainly this country, is going to pot. We're not dealing with the issues that need to be handled. We've got forced adoptions going on. We've got the NHS problems. We've got HS2 problems, money that we don't have. We're arguing about something we've already voted for. So why are we wasting time or money on other issues that are far more important than
you made your point.
No, yes, exactly, sir. And I think there's a disconnect with the people of this country. I have 2 children that were born in this country, that are citizens of this country, that will grow up in this country and love this country. And I think a lot of people in this country don't trust their politicians. Because of things that are brought up in Parliament every day and re-argued and re-strategized. I really think that there's a disconnect between the people of this country and their representatives.
I think also when you go through a situation like we've had where every single institution was on the same side against leaving, that worries me. You know, when you have was it Patty Ashdown with the name me one institution, the OECD, the UN, you know, people that really have no say in the matter. But you still, I don't know how many interviews of Patty I wanted to, well, I won't say what I wanted. But
say what you wanted.
In American New York style, as Trump would say, I wanted to slap him.
Oh, okay, right.
Not physically, but you know what I'm saying. I get very worried when this process wants to, they want to start redoing the process because they were all against it. So I don't necessarily trust them. Yes, we have to decide where we're going. I think that's a fair debate. But I see this thing getting to where it's like, oh, we need another this, and we need to stop on this, and we need another vote. And, oh, my gosh, well, we've had a vote. Now we're not going out because we're still staying in.
OK. You, sir, over there.
17.4 million people voted to leave the EU. Why have we not enacted Article 50? Well, how can 3 judges overrule 17.4 million people?
Lisa Nandy, what's your view of that particular point?
We haven't enacted Article 50 because the government has no idea what its priorities are in those negotiations. And the truth is, you say that people don't trust politicians and that they don't trust us to deliver this. And I feel that too. I think that's broadly right. But as a politician who spent 6 months in the run-up to that referendum talking to people in my own community and in places like Sunderland and Middlesbrough across the country, I felt people shaking with rage about a whole host of things, including the European Union and the rules around the European Union, but a whole host of things about how they had been left behind and politicians weren't listening. And they said to us, listen to us, this is our opportunity to make you listen. So if you honestly think that this decision today is going to lead to members of Parliament voting not to trigger Article 50, you are wrong.
Well,
because we heard it loud and clear. And if one thing has come out of this referendum, I think that it has shaken things up in Whitehall and Westminster. Now, to me, the next responsibility is not to rehash this old argument about the referendum, as Sajid is trying to do and many people are trying to stir up. The question now is how do we go and get the best deal for the British people? And it is a nonsense to argue, firstly, that you're a Democrat and then say, we'll go and tell Brussels what our deal is, but we won't tell the British people.
So, all right, hold on a second. There are a lot of people... Lisa, this is often said, and a number of people have said it here, why can't we know? What would you have the government say about the way they were going to deal? What do you want them actually to come up with? Because he says it's like playing poker. You're dealing with 27 European countries.
But I'd like to...
Would you be there if you were saying, well, this is what I'm going to ask for, like David Cameron did when he went? Look what happened there.
Yeah, well, like Keir Starmer said, I'd like to see the government say our first priority is jobs. And our second priority is making sure...
I'm sure he'd say the first priority is jobs.
I'm sorry, David, but it's not easily said, because Theresa May has heavily hinted that restrictions on freedom of movement would be her top priority over protecting...
So you want the detail on freedom of movement? You wanted to set out what her freedom of movement perspective was?
I wanted to tell us what her priorities broadly are. I want her to tell us whether we're still going to be part of the European arrest warrant, because that has profound implications for how we deal with national security and terrorism.
Is there any reason why these things can't be spelled out?
I want to know if we're going to protect
It's the reason
rights.
you just said, David. You don't go into a serious negotiation putting all your cards on the table. Anyone who's ever done a serious negotiation would tell you that, whether it's in politics or business or anywhere.
Well, I mean, does it
it's
seem
not in the interest of the British people.
I sense a lot of frustration, and it seems to me that partisan politics, which it seems to be a point of contention here, is frustrating the British people. Isn't that what that gentleman is very frustrated with the fact that his will is not being implemented because Labour and Conservative parties are busy fighting each other instead of helping the British people?
We've nearly had half our programme. I'm going to just go to one or two more members of our audience because I think it would be interesting. You, sir, in the second row there. Yeah. And then the person next to you. Yeah.
I think it's a rather weak line of argument to say the High Court made a wrong decision. I think they were asked a question and they answered it, and they did what was legally right. However, it's now up to Parliament to enact or enforce what we as the public decided.
Can I
so, in other words, so you think that the judges have simply said it's got to be done by Parliament, but the Parliament will have no objection to doing it because they'll be influenced or decide on the basis of the referendum?
So I would argue that the High Court asked the question, they have to answer it the appropriate way, which they did do, and now Parliament should enact what they asked the people. What's the point of giving a referendum if you're not going to enact?
On his left.
Yeah, so he's just taking my point as well. Yeah,
what
I'm saying is I totally agree with the ladies on the panel. If this ruling today is the law, then it is the law. What would be wasting time? We talked about wasting time. What would be wasting time is then appealing it to the Supreme Court and then keeping us in this uncertain times. To the gentleman, yeah, the reason it's not been enacted is because someone forgot that part of the law is to take this to Parliament. So we can't do it. If it's the law, just don't waste any more time. Just get this going. I don't think anyone's going to block this. I personally don't think that the House of Lords will block it or the Commons will block it. Just get it going.
Okay. And you said the white pull over there. Yes.
May I just remind Charlie Wolf and Sajid Javid and his cohorts that the statement is often made that the British people voted for Brexit. I am one of the British people, and I'm a proud European, and I did not vote for Brexit. Can I say there has been an analysis of the 54% who voted for Brexit, and often they did not vote for the substantive issue of whether they wanted to remain in Europe or not. They often voted. It was a criticism of the national government. So the whole thing is a joke. We don't have democracy given the lies that have been told. It's a disgrace.
So Does anyone think the referendum was not a joke and was a serious attempt to ask the British people? What do you think, sir? Up there, you've had your hand up a long time. Not you, but the man behind you. I'm sorry. Yes.
I don't see how you can challenge democracy when you don't get what you want. Now, I'm pretty sure some of us have sat through a general election and not got what we wanted, and we're a bit bitter for a while. But the issue is that it was so close, it was almost 50-50, and if this were a case of that 30 to 70% of the country spoke in a certain way, I guarantee you what we're having now wouldn't be happening, because there's a clear, decisive majority. And to come back to a point earlier, it seems this is about accountability. So people are talking about whether, and I actually agree with Lisa, comes down to, surely your MP's job is to not necessarily say what their own opinion is, but what their constituency says.
Okay. And so, just before we go on, if there are problems in Parliament, could it come to a general election, do you think, before Easter?
There are no plans for an early election, and that's the way. So the next election is May 2020.
So there are no plans for it, but they're not being ruled out by government.
The next election is in 2020. That's the plan. Yeah, I'm absolutely petrified of Corbyn.
OK. All right, we'll go on. Just before we go on to the next question, we're going to be in Southend-on-Sea next week, and question time comes from Stirling the week afterwards. So do come. The details of how to apply are on the screen, and as always, I'll give them in more detail at the end. Zakaria Mohammed, let's have your question, please.
Is Clinton just as bad as Trump?
Is Clinton just as bad as Trump?
Yeah.
Huey Morgan.
Well, in a lot of ways, especially in the mainstream media in the United Kingdom, you don't hear about the WikiLeaks thing, about about Hillary Clinton being as corrupt as she really is. And you hear all this sensational Donald Trump stuff, and I'm not defending Donald Trump by any stretch of the imagination. But when you have two very unpopular politicians, and Hillary Clinton is the poster child for the establishment politician in the United States who has been spending the last 30 years lining her pockets with favors that she's been charging a lot of money for. Yes, she is pretty shady, man. And with that,
you mean that she's shady?
Oh, she's shady.
So she'd be a shady president.
Well, I mean, the point being, and I may be using a vernacular that's not used on the show too much, but
shady. The word shady is often
shady.
used.
Okay, we understand shady. I know you're kind of hip like that, but in a large respect, especially in the United States, you have people who, you know, I guess we can quote the Bible and say, Father, they know not what they do. Forgive them. And there are a lot of people that are so frustrated with establishment politics and established politicians and the establishment in general that some people who would displace reality because they're so frustrated and accept Donald Trump's situation rather than vote for Hillary Clinton, who has a long and involved track record of having a public opinion and a private opinion.
Is shady criminal or is shady just shady?
Well, shady will turn out to be criminal if the FBI is investigating it twice.
That's shady.
You might be up to something. You know, and I'm not saying that. And the flip of the coin is Donald Trump, and we were talking about popularism before and how dangerous that can be. But when you have people who have been spending a good portion of their lives being disenfranchised and marginalized by establishment politics and established politicians, you see that they can see a refreshing Donald Trump who doesn't lie. I mean, he's not saying anything smart. He's a snake oil salesman, and you see him.
Did you just say Donald Trump doesn't lie?
Well, no, I didn't say. No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Please.
I'm sorry.
I apologize. I apologize if I misspoke. I'm saying that in an argument of this cycle being a lesser of two evils, people always ask me, well, what would you do if you had a gun to your head? And I always said, I'll probably take the bullet. Because out of the two of these politicians, I can't really see a clear path to anything getting better in the United States. I mean, there are a lot of people who do support Donald Trump, and I think the frustration is very recognized. And I think very smart people displace reality to get across to his point of view. I'm not one of those people. But on the other hand, I served the United States military. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, and I understand that not many people have as much contempt for people who spend their time in uniform than Hillary Clinton does. Yeah. And with that said, and a lot of veterans in this country can kind of understand when they come back from a situation, a war, if you will, they're not looked after, and they feel very disenfranchised, as the saying goes. But in the United States, there's a very rich history of popularism politics. In the 19th century, there was a great president called Andrew Jackson in the United States. He's on the $50 bill. Can I indulge myself for a moment with this story? Okay, great.
No, only briefly.
Only briefly. All right, so he was known as King Mob because his constituency, the people who supported him, were rednecks. They were considered people who were not educated, but people who wanted freedom and liberty anyway. Point being is that he had an inauguration party, and they had to actually put the people outside because they were breaking china and standing on the furniture. Now, this happens a lot of the time. And this guy was not a prize either. He was attempted to be assassinated. The first president to be an attempted assassination by an English dude.
Out in the front of the White House.
Yeah, by an English dude. By no disrespect, but this guy tried to shoot a musket at him. It didn't work, and this President Andrew Jackson beat this guy up with a cane. And Davy Crockett, remember Davy Crockett with the hat? Okay, he had to pull him off. Anyway, this has been going on a long time.
This has been going on a long time. This has been going on.
We've been crazy in America for a long time. Don't think this is just coming up.
Are you Clinton or Trump? As if you had to vote, or would you not vote?
I would not vote.
Okay. What would you do, Charlie Wolf?
I'm voting Trump. I'll tell you. The question was, what was it? Are they just as bad as the other?
No, is Clinton just as bad as Trump?
No, she's worse. She is absolutely worse.
What?
Totally. She is totally worse. Again, as Huey said, she's got, I think, 2, possibly 3 investigations going on by the FBI right now.
Cleared.
No, she hasn't been cleared.
She was cleared.
No, the investigation is still going on. And I assure you, the FBI, the FBI is not going to write a letter. Comey is not going to write a letter to Congress about new information unless there's something there. I mean, the man is not that stupid to just go and put a letter out. What's that?
You should be ashamed of yourself voting for such a man as Trump.
But you see,
you really should.
But you see, this is the thing that I find worrying. First off, everybody has a vote, and it's their vote, and it's their personal vote. And I always hate this when someone says, for instance, like Prop 9, which was the gay marriage bill in California. And there were people saying, it's immoral for you to vote this way. Well, if it's immoral, why did you give me the choice? This is the candidate. He was chosen by the people. And again, this is the people like yourself. All right? This is not, oh, we're not too smart to figure it out. We need to have these people over here figure it out. The Founding Fathers put trust in the people. And they said...
Well, not so much, because they have the Electoral College, and in no way, shape, or form is Donald Trump going to win the Electoral College.
That's true.
It doesn't really matter. She could win, and she's going to win. And it's frustrating to hear people like yourself being
Let's not go into
disingenuous.
this folly. Stick with the question. Is Clinton just as bad as Trump, and you think she's worse?
She's worse because she's been in the system and working this. This is the lady, remember, who in her biography said, we left the White House dirt poor, and now lives in Chappaqua, New York. Bill, the latest thing is how much money Bill made in a couple of years. It was in the millions. I mean,
when he left the presidency.
Yeah, when he left the...
But after the presidency.
And this was, but this was because that's. I don't have a problem with that.
She's not the candidate.
She
is the candidate. He's not the candidate.
Yeah, but this is what was happening. She was the Secretary of State, and it seems that Bill would show up in a country. A big donation would be made to the Clinton Foundation. Then suddenly, our Secretary of State also seems to show up in the same country, and some favorable deal seems to be happening. Now, I don't know. You figure it out.
Zanny?
David, can I just one second? And I respect your right. There's a lot of frustration in America, and I respect your right to vote for whomever you like. But the idea that there is an equivalence between these two candidates is completely extraordinary. Donald Trump is the worst candidate in modern American history. His temperament, he is frankly, a misogynist. He is a man who brags about groping women. He's a man who has incited racial tendencies, racial incitement. He is a man who has publicly mocked a disabled reporter. His temperament is absolutely ill-suited to being the commander-in-chief of the democracy that the rest of the world looks up to. Secondly, quite apart from his temperament, put that aside for a second. That alone, in my view, disqualifies him. But beyond that, his policies, if you look at them, are policies that would hurt most the very people he purports to help. He's a complete con man. He cuts taxes for the rich. His protectionism would raise costs for the poor people.
I agree with you on protection. I agree with you as far as protectionism, which I do find a worry. I'm not quite sure where he's going, and that is a worry. But if you listen, wait a minute. If you listen to his economics. If you listen to his economics compared to Hillary's, it's far smarter.
In what way?
Because he wants to grow the economy. First off, he wants to lower corporate tax rates from 35% down to 15%. He wants to bring money. There's $2.5 trillion sitting offshore that isn't being used. He wants to bring it back into the country. And I think that's pretty smart.
I think this is a good example of how smart people will displace reality because you just do not like Hillary Clinton.
Listen, we've had 8 years of
let's be frank about this. Let's be frank about this. You're a bright guy. I'm a bright guy. But you seem to be making excuses for a man who is unexcusable.
But wait a minute.
All right. Leave aside hold on. Wait a second. You can flatter each other about your intelligence, but I want to hear from the woman in the very back there with the white pullover on. Yes.
Thank you. What I don't understand, and what I've had trouble explaining to my children, is how two such unpopular candidates have ended up the final two people to choose from.
All right. Sajid Javid, how come, do you think?
How come what? How these
what
two
she
candidates
said,
ended
yes.
up?
How do you end up with these two candidates that are being rubbished on each side here?
Very tempting discussion, but look, what I'd say is this.
Temptation. I mean, answering the question promotes trust.
What I'd say, I think as a government minister, it'd be wrong to pick a candidate.
I knew he was going to say that.
I don't think it'd be right. I don't like foreign ministers when they interfere in our elections, so we shouldn't interfere in others as a minister.
Zipped up.
But if what we do, I think
it's tough having an opinion in 2016.
Whoever wins this election, America is our most important ally. It's the most important country that we have to work with, both in terms of our prosperity. It's as our second largest trading partner. It's the largest economy in the world. It's vitally important to our security. So whoever is installed in the White House, we're going to have to work with them. So I'm not going to pick sides, but, I look forward to working with her.
You know what I think?
Can I just ask
Lisa Nandy.
You're going to put him in the country.
So I'm slightly encouraged by the last word that Sajid just gave us. I mean, I think it's true that Hillary Clinton has flaws as a candidate, and I think it's undeniable that she hasn't managed to inspire America in the same way as someone like Barack Obama, but she has a very radical economic programme, much more radical actually than Obama had. And I don't think it's an accident that the first time that we've got a woman in contention to be President of the United States, we've got childcare and maternity rights as a central plank of the presidential campaign. So there are reasons to want to vote for Hillary Clinton, but consider seriously the alternative. Donald Trump is a liar, he's a bully, he's a misogynist and he's a racist. He's been endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan. He insults war veterans. He brags about not paying his taxes and he's built his entire career on exploiting workers in America. This is seriously dangerous, not just for American people, but because this is a man who says he greatly admires Putin and has said that he wouldn't come to the aid of a fellow NATO country if they were in trouble. If I was in America with a vote next week, I would walk through fire to vote for Hillary Clinton to stop this from happening.
Are there any voices for Trump in the audience? Because many people with their hands up who speak for him. Yes, you, sir, in the centre there. No, the man in the centre. There, don't look around as though you didn't put your hand up.
Join the fun.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to jump to the conclusion that Trump's only doing well because somehow the American people are initially racist or something. I think that's such a sellout argument. Then it's not that. It's because they're fed up of their progressive government not actually listening to their core views. And it's like Brexit. It's in many similarities to that, because for decades we had sort of governments not actually listening to what the British people said, not actually listening to their concerns in regards to immigration, in regards to how our societies are changing. And Trump is tapping into that same mentality. And it's such a pathetic thing to just say, oh, he's racist as an argument.
Anybody else agree with him? You, sir, in the pink, yes.
Every argument that you can make against Donald Trump, you can make just the same argument, if not more, against Hillary Clinton. The choice is you get 4 years of Trump, which will be a disaster. You get 8 years of Clinton, which will be a disaster. But what is worse is the hypocrisy that goes on at the moment with the Obamas. 2008, Michelle Obama stood on a stage and said Hillary Clinton is unfit to be the President of the United States. Now, they're best buddies. What's happened from 2008 to where we are now, where Barack Obama and his wife are best friends and are endorsing Hillary Clinton?
Zanny, what's happened?
What's happened?
Well, the alternative is, well, 1 point for the American people is the alternative is Donald Trump, and secondly, that Hillary Clinton, who became President Obama's Secretary of State, who worked closely with him, is someone who will continue his legacy. And actually, Lisa, I agree with pretty much everything you said, except for one word. I think it's not clear to me that she has a radical agenda. Hillary Clinton is an incrementalist who is somewhere in the centre of the Democratic Party. She's going to push the Obama agenda forward. I don't agree with everything she proposes. I think it's sad that she's now against trade in the TPP. I think her tax plan is fiddly. She's too keen on regulation. But broadly, she's a centrist Democrat compared to Donald Trump, whose policies, even if you abstract from his personality, which I think disqualifies him by itself, but his policies would be bad for America and they would be bad for the world. And it's particularly dangerous for those of us outside America, because his protectionism would hit us as well, and his view of his allies, which seems to be, you know, take it or leave it, America may or may not be your ally, is extraordinarily dangerous.
OK. Right. We'll leave it there and we'll reassemble on Thursday. Thursday week.
Yeah. Can I come back and gloat?
Yeah, you can come back and either gloat or whatever it is you do, and you can eat your words or not, depending how it goes. Let's come back to domestic politics. Victor Phillips, your question, please, Mr. Phillips.
Was the government right to reject an inquiry into the Battle of Orgreave?
This was the decision this week, that there were ultimately no deaths or wrongful convictions, so the Home Secretary said there was not sufficient basis for an inquiry. Lisa Nandy.
No, they weren't. They were absolutely wrong to do it, and they were wrong for a number of reasons. They were wrong, firstly, because the people who were affected by what happened at the Battle of Orgreave have lived with that for the rest of their lives. Many of them, they've seen it seriously harm or kill their career prospects. They've seen real damage to their health and their mental health and to their families and to their communities and to their lives. And we've had a series of revelations over the last few years, starting with a BBC documentary and an investigation by the IPCC, when South Yorkshire Police self-referred themselves for that investigation, which found serious evidence of corruption and wrongdoing in that police force. And you can't say for certain whether Hillsborough would never have happened had that been properly investigated at the time, but those links must be explored and we must learn lessons for the future. And the government hasn't just rejected calls for an inquiry into the Battle of Orgreave. What Theresa May has done is she has dropped heavy hints that she was going to hold an inquiry into the Battle of Orgreave. Her own Chief of Staff just a few months ago wrote a piece arguing strongly that the government should do it. There were briefings to the newspapers that it was going to happen. There were commitments given in meetings between the Home Secretary and campaigners. And then suddenly we had this statement to the House of Commons just a few days ago telling people that all of that promise had been broken. And that is utterly unforgivable.
Yeah. There were years of Labour government. Why didn't the Labour government investigate? I mean, Orgreave was back in 1984.
Well,
13 years.
I'll tell you why. Because the papers were released under the 30-year rule in 2012, by which point we'd been out of office for 2 full years. The IPCC investigation then took another further 2 years, and that was when the Orgreave campaign was set up, and that's when the calls for an inquiry were made to the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, and quite simply, we weren't in power.
OK. Sajid Javid.
I think, clearly, look, it's a very serious, sensitive issue, and that's why the Home Secretary was right to meet with everyone involved, those calling for an inquiry and others, and weigh up all the evidence, everything that was being put in front of her, and that's exactly what she did. But she reached the right conclusion, because her job is to decide what's in the public interest. And what she had to weigh up is also not just what happened then at the time, but also what has happened since then. Decades have passed, and when it comes to policing, there's been some significant changes in how we police our country, significant improvements, how we carry out prosecutions. We've got an independent prosecution service. We've got an independent body that investigates any complaints against the police anywhere in the country. We've got now even police and crime commissioners directly elected. So a lot has changed about how we police ourselves.
It was only a few months ago that Theresa May's Chief of Staff said if we want to make sure the police are above corruption, collusion and cover-ups, we need to investigate cases.
I mean,
despite everything you say.
I don't think that point is fair, because when he wrote about this, he wasn't her Chief of Staff, and I don't think it's fair to sort of say he believes that as her...
So he's stopped believing it now?
No, he's not the decision-maker. The decision-maker are the ministers. The Chief of Staff's job is to do what the Prime Minister says. And the decision here is clear, and I think it was a difficult decision for the Home Secretary. She made that clear in her statement in Parliament, but when she balanced everything out, I think she absolutely came to the right decision.
All right, you, sir.
Thank you.
Hold on. We're here for you. Yes.
I mean, it's interesting what you say. Are you sure it's less to do with what was in the public interest, and more to do what's within the interest of the Conservative Party?
No, you down here. Yes. You have to say it again, because the microphone's only just reached you.
Probably just as well. Yeah. You say decades have passed. Yes, decades have passed from Hillsborough. So how can it not be the right thing to do to look back at what's affected people's lives, their health, their jobs, their lives? Nobody died, thank goodness. But to say that decades have passed and it doesn't matter anymore is an absolute outrage.
Here in London.
Well, I agree with the lady. I think throughout our history in popular political science, and I think you pretty much said the truth there, it seems that working class people do not really get a fair shake. If this was something that did not have to do, if it had to do with Etonians having a little party and got out of hand, I'm sure we would have had everything we needed to know about it. And that's the problem. I think that's the problem that people feel frustrated about in this country. You know, I have young children, and they're going to grow up in this country, and I don't want them to have a bickering government. I don't want them going back and forth on who's important and who's not. You know, we're all important. And I think in the backs of our minds, we all know this. And I think in the front of our minds, we forget it. And I think that's the problem. We have to think a little bit more as we are all in the same boat together, rather than you are on that side of the aisle and I'm on this side.
So you think that there should have been an inquiry? Yeah. And you, sir, what do you think?
I think that Maggie Thatcher's government was covering up at the time, and the government now is still covering up for Margaret Thatcher.
OK. Do you want to speak? You keep shaking your head. No, you don't. Right. Zanny.
I agree. I think the bright light of transparency is good, and I find it hard to follow the logic that says not having a public inquiry is in the public interest. I think that it is... You can argue and you can debate and you can think about what the right remit for the public inquiry is, and we have had experience in public inquiries that have had too broad a remit, that have gone on for too long, that haven't been done well. But a well-thought-out, scoped public inquiry seems to me to be incontrovertibly part of coming to terms with something.
Despite the cost. Is the cost... People keep citing the cost of Chilcot at 13 million.
And
Leveson at 5 million. This is money, you keep spending money on
What
these
price
things.
justice?
What do you say? Who said that? You? Yes. Yeah, go on.
Cheap.
And what do you think about this issue?
It should go ahead, as you said.
Okay.
Thank you.
Charlie Wolf.
Sometimes spending a couple bucks is actually the good thing.
Exactly.
Charlie Wolf.
In 1984, I first arrived in the country and I was on a boat spinning records, so it makes it kind of hard for me to talk about the incident in particular. But I also believe that, yes, you know, the bright lights of transparency, the truth, you know, shall prevail. I believe in that. But I think it also needs to be tempered with, there are times I've seen some investigations. I think Chilcot, it was a waste of time, quite frankly, as far as I was concerned.
Okay.
But I just wanted to finish by saying there are times when I think you look at, for instance, some of the inquiries that are happening or they want to happen in Northern Ireland where it's putting soldiers' lives at risk. You know, that sometimes is something that doesn't get noticed to the extent it should do.
You said the back in blue.
Norman Tebbit commented that the inquiry could have been used as a stick to beat the the Thatcher government. And isn't the real reason that we're not having an inquiry is that the difference between Hillsborough and Orgreave is that that the police were acting at Orgreave as a direct arm of the state.
Right. Have you spoken already? No, you, sir.
The reality is it leads on to all the other manipulations going on by the state. The Shrewsbury strikers, the Liverpool dockers, the whole machinery of the state was used against social protest at that time, and they don't want to draw a line in it because it goes back to the whole of Maggie Thatcher's legacy.
Sajid Javid, does this give you pause to think?
No, I think what it shows, and quite rightly so, it is a difficult, sensitive issue. There is a lot to weigh up here. But at the end of the day, you know, any minister that's confronted with this, and the Home Secretary certainly was, you have to make a call on what's in the public interest. You can't ignore just simply things like cost, although that shouldn't be the main factor, but they are important parts of the process. But decide if you actually went through with the inquiry, you want to make sure there's actually a good reason to believe there'll be lessons learned. But so much has changed about policing.
Lessons learned?
Because so much has changed about policing, how we police in this country. It is radically different to what it was decades ago, and a lot of those lessons have been learned.
She was keen on it before.
A legacy is shredded, and you're trying to keep it alive. Her legacy died and went with Hillsborough inquiry. And you Tories are trying to keep it alive. And that's why the real reason you won't have this inquiry at Orgreave.
And you said...
Is it a coincidence that the South Yorkshire Police, who were involved with Hillsborough and Orgreave as well, and has this decision been taken in light of the fact that the same force were involved in it?
Exactly.
I think the South Yorkshire Police want the inquiry, didn't they?
Well, I don't know.
The government
I don't know. I wasn't close enough to the decision, but it's a decision for the government made by the Home Secretary.
Release the papers.
Release the papers. We'll go to one last question. Herbert Crossman, please. Herbert Crossman.
I'd like to ask the panel, do they think that the poppy has now become a political symbol rather than a symbol of remembrance?
Has the poppy become a political symbol? And this, of course, goes to the football decision about not being allowed to wear poppies or being allowed to wear poppies because it's political. Let's just go round the table here because we've only got a few minutes left. Huey Morgan, you were a Marine in the United States. What do you think about the significance of the poppy?
I think, especially when it comes to FIFA, I don't think they really should be telling us what morality is about. I think every once in a while, some people should have an opinion. And if you don't stick by your principles when things are tough, they're not principles, they're hobbies.
Okay. What do you think? There wouldn't be a FIFA if we didn't have these red poppies, because we'd probably all be speaking German. You know, we say about this one I have here on top, you know, these colors don't run. I say the same about this. These colors don't run. You know, we owe our lives to these guys, and I think that's not too much to do just to put that poppy on your shirt.
All right. We're all wearing poppies. Lisa, you're wearing a poppy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in itself tells you we don't agree on much on this panel, but we do agree that the poppy is a symbol of remembrance and it's a symbol of hope. And the truth is that I don't think anybody in this country is going to take any lessons from FIFA on what is or isn't politically acceptable. This is an organisation that thinks that it is OK to hand the World Cup to Qatar with its human rights record and allow workers to die building those football stadiums.
Yeah. Well, it's not quite... The question was about whether it's a political symbol rather than a symbol of remembrance. Does anyone believe that to be true? Because there are people who feel that. You feel that? No, you're wearing a poppy. Where are you? Yeah, speak up.
I think these days it's taken the wrong way. Really, it's for remembrance, but people are taking it as though it means war. It doesn't mean war. It means what our granddads fought for to save our people. And that's all it is. It's nothing political. It's just about remembering what we've done, what our families have done for this nation. That's all it is. It's not about, you know, making out that someone else is... You know, it's not even about the recent times. It's about the past. It's not about Iraq or the Middle East. It's just about the past.
It kind of is. It is, actually. It is about...
No, it's not. No, it's not. My granddad died in World War One. My great-granddad died in World War One. And my granddad died in World War Two. Okay, and it's not about that. My family go to the British Legion. Do you know what the British Legion is? You're American. Yeah? It's the British Legion. And at the end of the day, yeah, it's not about the Middle East. It's not about that. It's about what happened in World War
II. If you let me finish, maybe you'd understand my point of view. Sometimes we listen to respond. I don't. I was listening to what you said. I took it in, and I thought to myself, if you don't remember your past, you're doomed to repeat it. And that's why I said it has something to do with now. That's what I meant.
It's not about the Middle East.
All right, you say it's not about that, but would you wear your poppy for British soldiers who have been killed in Iraq?
Well, I'm not even wearing one.
No,
you can see that.
Hang on. You say it's your grandfather and your father. What about people who fought in Afghanistan and Iraq? Do you think a poppy should be worn for them?
No, but what I'm trying to say is that people think that people are wearing it to kind of have a go at people, you know, have a go at that situation, whereas for me, I don't see it related to the Middle East.
I get it.
Is what I mean.
Zanny.
I see it as just being a peace thing.
I think it's a symbol of remembrance. It should be a symbol of remembrance. It isn't now a political symbol and certainly shouldn't become one.
All right. And Sajid?
Look, when I was Culture Secretary, I remember getting a briefing on FIFA for the first time, and I'm not surprised they've made this dumb decision. And it's just the kind of thing I would expect from them. Unfortunately, and as we've got everyone on this panel, lots of different, as we've seen today, lots of different political backgrounds, persuasions. We're all wearing poppies, and that's because it's not a political symbol. It is a symbol of peace, and that's why the footballers should be allowed to wear it.
Thank you. On that note, we have to stop because our hour's up. Question Time moves to Southend-on-Sea next week. Liz Truss is going to be there for the Tories, Diane Abbott for Labour, Omid Jalili, the comedian, is going to be on the panel too. And the week after that, we're going to be in Stirling. So it's Southend-on-Sea and then Stirling. Come and take part. There on the screen is the website, or you can call the phone number 0330 123 9988. If you're listening on 5 Live, you know well this debate goes on Question Time Extra Time. But my thanks to this panel and to all of you who came to Watford to take part in this edition. Until next Thursday, from Question Time, good night.
And the Brexit debate continues with Andrew Neil on This Week Next on BBC One, also discussing Russia, America and the New World Order, while author Frederick Forsyth talks secrets.
There'll be no easy rides, no pulling punches, no backing down, no holding back. No doubt, no fear, no nonsense, no wait. No never minds, no better luck next